Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the You Can Exhale Now podcast. And today I have Victoria Evans, who teaches women how to eat intuitively and stop dieting forever. So I am really excited about this episode because I think she will share lots and lots of tips with us on how to stop the self sabotage and food guilt and overeating so that we can enjoy our life more fully and be free. Welcome to You Can Exhale Now, a mindful living podcast for the modern pace, hosted by Lesia Liu. This podcast is for anyone who wants to get more out of life without the burnout. Because when you learn to take proper care of yourself, you have more energy, a more positive outlook, and more gratitude for life. And because you cannot reach your goals if you're tired, overwhelmed, judgmental, angry, and feel sorry for yourself. Each episode, you will learn actionable strategies for self-care, mental health, productivity, better life-work balance, and happiness from coaches, therapists, and experts. Stop holding your breath. You can exhale now. Choose to be a more authentic version of yourself than you've been in a while. So, Victoria, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. So as you mentioned, I'm an intuitive eating coach. And so it was interesting how I kind of came across that path. And I'll share a little bit about my story and kind of how I came to be that. Basically, kind of growing up, like a lot of us, I kind of felt like I didn't fit in. I was tall from a really young age, kind of heavier set. I had an athletic build, broad shoulders. And again, I didn't fit in. I always struggled with my weight, and I really used food as my escape. It's kind of like that drug of choice to kind of cope with feeling inadequate, as well as some mental health issues. I suffered from depression, anxiety, and later a sexual assault, and food was really always that thing for me that was almost like my best friend, but my worst enemy. It was always there for me, but it also kind of harmed me in that way. And so after that sexual assault in university, I actually gained a lot of weight. I kind of had my body was my armor, and it really shielded me kind of against the world, but also made me feel a little bit invisible. And then after university, I tried a bunch of different diets and exercise plans, and eventually I bought a 12-week weight loss guaranteed program. And this was really the beginning of the end for me because I kind of went all in on this program. Pushed through the starvation, a level of calorie restriction, intense healthy workouts, and I lost 80 pounds in a matter of weeks. But I also kind of nearly lost my life in the process. Yeah. And so I developed an eating disorder, and I would kind of starve myself all day long and over exercise. And then was so hungry at night that I would go on these huge binges. And it was really stressful, and I'd be filled with so much shame and anger and anxiety of any possible weight gain, that I would basically purge it all up. So then it turned into bulimia from anorexia, and my identity at this point had become, the girl who had lost weight. And I was getting so much attention all of a sudden, and acceptance that I'd really been seeking my entire life, and, that fitting in that I'd always wanted, because I'd been seen as this inspiration for losing so much weight so quickly. And so, I was really skinny and I was at this goal weight, but I'd actually never been unhappier or unhealthier in my entire life. I thought that weight loss was going to kind of solve my depression, solve my anxiety, solve all these problems in my life. And I kind of got to this point and I was at my lowest weight, and, I still had all those things. And it was this shocking moment where I realized that there was never going to be enough weight loss. My body was never going to look a certain way that was basically going to solve it, and I was going to be able to start living. And so I kind of hit that rock bottom and decided I really needed to change. And so I started seeing some therapists for my eating disorder. But I felt like it was really limited. Basically, it was really just about my emotions and my past. And I felt like I was kind of missing a key part of the equation. I felt like I was two different people almost. One who would, restrict all day long, and then at night I would kind of get out of control and eat and couldn't stop myself and didn't care about the consequences. And they didn't really get that, therapists and the counselors. So I kind of did my own digging. Being from a very science-based background, I really needed to kind of understand how my brain and my body functioned when it came to my certain exercise, my eating behaviors. And this kind of led me on this journey of hundreds of hours of research and painstaking trial and error to kind of uncover these answers that ultimately changed my life. And on this journey, I unlocked the key to intuitive eating and healing my own relationship with food. And it was through this education that I was able to remove this shame and this frustration and confusion and anger and all these things, and instead become empowered in my eating choices, understand why I was doing certain things from a biological standpoint. And all of a sudden I had this program that was starting to form. I was understanding my emotions, I was understanding the science, my eating behaviors, everything was starting to click. And I realized that no one was really teaching other people how to heal their relationship with food in this way. No one was, teaching how to eat intuitively from this kind of science-based background. And so that's ultimately how I ended up as an intuitive eating coach. I was so successful in my own recovery, from anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, extreme dieting, over exercising, everything, and healed myself in such an incredible, unique way that I'm now a science-based intuitive eating coach.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this story. I'm sure there has been a lot of intense moments in your life, so I truly appreciate
Hmm.
that you're open and share this with us. So thank you for that. And then I
Yeah.
think that it's interesting that food and nutrition is such an integral part of our lives, right? We
Hmm.
are supposed to eat at least 3 times a day or 5 times a day, yet some people do not watch what they're eating whatsoever, and
Hmm.
they put a lot of unhealthy stuff into their bodies, and others watch every calorie and they are unable to enjoy and savor the food, because it
Hmm.
is a very pleasurable experience of eating
Yes.
if done correctly. So, can
Hmm.
you tell us about what intuitive eating is and how does it differ from dieting?
Hmm. So I really define intuitive eating as almost the end result of healing your relationship with food. So when there's no more guilt, there's no more shame, you're actually able to listen to your body and honor it. It's having a lot of self-awareness around why, when, and how much you're eating. And it's really getting in tune with your body again after all these years of dieting and restriction and weight loss schemes, and really society in general telling you how to live your life. So kind of once you strip back all those things of people telling you what to eat, what not to eat, all of that, what you're left with is simply listening to your body, your intuition. And your intuition, it's what has been there your entire life. When we're kids, we're generally intuitive eaters. We'll take a few bites of some food and then we'll be done. We'll have a little bit of dessert, but then we're done. We don't emotionally eat. We don't need to overeat because food is just food. We enjoy it. Like you said, it's pleasurable, but it's nothing beyond that. And it's really only as we kind of start to get older that we start to use food in this way of coping almost. And we start to get really disordered and we want to start to change our bodies. And so we start to manipulate how we want to eat food and how we want to move our body. And at the end of the day, our body knows what it wants. It knows what it needs. The way our body works, our enteric nervous system basically has all these neurons, neurochemicals firing on this almost super information highway from our stomach to our brain. And it's telling us everything, at every moment, like we want to eat this food. It's this connection between your stomach and your brain. They call it the second gut, and it knows what your body wants. And it's just a matter of us trusting our body. And intuitive eating is really based in the trust, knowing that your body knows best, trusting that you can listen to it and honor it. But oftentimes we really fear doing that because we've spent so long being told we can't trust our own body, and that we kind of need to listen to external sources to tell us what we should or shouldn't be eating.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. But would you say, I think with exercising and the same with eating, if
Mhm.
let's say you've been putting all these unhealthy habits in places and you have this really strong neurological connections to unhealthy foods and what it means to your mental health almost, I would say it's
Mhm.
pretty hard to start trusting, like you said, to listen to your body and to start on
Mhm.
the right journey, especially if you've been doing this for years and maybe your chemicals are a little bit messed up, not to the point
Mhm.
where there is no comeback, but there is that first step is always the hardest. Do you have any tips on how to start doing that even after years of self-abuse, let's call it that?
Mhm. So the first thing I would say is getting a little bit more mindful. Oftentimes when we're eating, we kind of zone out, or we're too rushed, and we don't really pay attention to how food actually feels in our body, or how we feel at even any given time of the day, especially when we're struggling, with mental health and all of that. We kind of just almost check out from our own body. We kind of end up sometimes even going on autopilot. And so the first thing when it comes to intuitive eating is really just starting to get a little bit more present, a little bit more mindful in your current life. And so that is, ask myself, am I hungry right now? Or am I not hungry? What do I feel like eating? Another favorite of mine is, am I doing this out of love, or am I doing this out of fear? Like, am I eating this food because I love my body and I want to nourish it and make it feel good? Or am I eating this food out of fear that, I'm going to gain weight and all these, I'm going to be unhealthy forever? And kind of getting really curious around what is the reason behind what you are doing, and breaking out of that kind of autopilot. Um, and even from, if you're someone who is, really struggling with even just the basic kind of tasks, one of the tips I would say is, first, make sure you're getting enough sleep, because your brain, you can't even really access your intuition much if you're not able to properly access the information, because you're sleep deprived. So sleep is a huge component of intuitive eating, because you're going to be craving high sugary, high calorie foods if you're not getting enough sleep, simply because your body is going to want to get your energy levels up. And the higher the calorie, the higher the sugary food, the more energy, calories is energy that's going to have. And so if you're finding that you're always reaching for really sugary foods, maybe you're not getting enough sleep. So that is kind of a place to start for that. Another thing I would suggest is, if you're like getting enough sleep, but even getting a little bit of sunlight. So if you're feeling really tired, you don't want to move your body, when you go out into the sun, it actually turns off the melatonin production behind your eyes, so you feel more awake. So if you're finding you're very lethargic, during the workday, you don't have any energy, you're always, again, want some sugary, junky kind of food, you might be tired. So getting enough sleep, and then going outside for a few minutes and getting some fresh air, getting some sunlight to make you feel more awake as well. And, when we feel good, we want to do other things that make us feel good. So focusing on a lot of that self-care. So, getting enough sleep, sunlight, and then moving your body in some way. Basically, we spend so much of our lives kind of hunched over on our phone, our shoulders are forward. And if you think about it, if you were to take away someone's phone and you would just look at them, it would look like they're hunched over, look like they're sick almost, right? Like, they're, from a physiological standpoint, when you're so kind of caved over and hunched over looking at your phone, your body kind of sends signals thinking that you're unwell. So if a little kind of biohack, as it were, if you're feeling very tired and kind of upset and fearful, a little trick is to even just stand up and pull your shoulders all the way back and down, almost kind of like that Superman or Superwoman pose you might have heard of. But basically that signals to your body that, hey, we're not, unwell, we're confident, we're safe, we're healthy, we're happy, all these things. And when your body starts to feel that way, again, you're going to want to reach for more foods that make you feel good. You're going to want to exercise and move your body in a way that makes you feel good. So standing up, having your shoulders straight, and then doing a little bit of gentle walking, even if you're someone who's really struggling to kind of even get to a place where you can go to the gym, or, do a dance class, or, move your body in a more intensive kind of way. What I would suggest is even just moving, like walking, or just some gentle yoga. But basically, all these things kind of reassure your brain, reassure your body that, hey, we're okay, we're healthy, we're safe. And when you're feeling good, you're going to want to do other things that make you feel good.
Yeah, I actually did the exercise with the shoulders right now myself, and
Yeah,
it works. So
it does. Yeah, it's, if you think about it, it's almost like, don't be guarding your heart. If you kind of think it from that point, if you're guarding your heart, you're basically, your body's going to interpret that you're unsafe. But if your heart is, out exposed, so shoulders back, pulled down, chest up high, then your heart is exposed. Your body thinks, oh, there's nothing wrong, because she's exposing her heart, essentially. So if you're in a bad mood, expose your heart, and see how much better you feel.
beautiful. Yeah. So from a technical standpoint, how do
Yeah.
you start replacing high sugary foods, like you said, foods that we're craving but probably are not great for us, not
Mhm.
the healthiest versions of nutrition? How do we start strategically replacing those foods with better foods? What should we be looking at when we are grocery shopping? What should we be looking at when we are cooking? And, there are lots of people who unfortunately do not have enough time to cook. So fast food or takeout is their kind of the default option. So how do we start strategically make little changes to a healthier, better, balanced nutrition?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is the mindset behind it, right? A lot of us kind of know what healthy foods are and what healthy foods aren't when it comes to, more fresh produce, fruits and vegetables and all those things. Like we think that those are the healthier foods. So why don't we always eat them, right? Like why do we always reach for junk food when we know that a carrot or an apple is spinach
Exactly.
kind of better, right? And it comes down to the mindset behind it. And so when we think about diets and all, like restricting and meal plans, basically what thing they have in common is that it's kind of taking food away. It's not enjoyable, it's not pleasurable. And so our diets fail 95% of the time. And so we need to kind of switch around the mindset. If I want to start eating healthier, instead of coming at from a dieting standpoint of I'm taking things away, I would say let's focus on adding things in. So kind of switching around that from like a scarcity more to an abundance mindset. And so if you're someone right now, you're like, oh, I'm eating all this junk food and I really would like to make a healthier switch. One of the things I would suggest doing is a technique I call crowding out. So basically, if I am always eating, for example, fast food, so every day after work, I'm having McDonald's, then instead of saying, I'm never allowed to have McDonald's again or no more McDonald's, have some McDonald's, but also maybe you have some carrots and an apple with it. And maybe you have, like a little side salad. And then you just kind of keep crowding out that McDonald's with healthier foods. So maybe then, a few days later, instead of getting the entire meal at McDonald's, you just get the sandwich. And then you pair that with the carrots and the apples and all those things. And you kind of just keep kind of encroaching in and taking away a little bit more of the unhealthy food and kind of crowding it out with a healthier option. And so it feels, again, still very abundant. And you're still, always allowed to have those foods. Don't get into that kind of mentality of I'm not allowed to have this, because your brain is kind of like a child. It wants what it can't have. And so when you are doing this technique, just thinking about adding in foods that make you feel good, and don't think about just taking away. And then over time, your body will naturally want to crave those kind of healthier foods just because it makes you feel good. But it'll be very difficult to want to start to make that swap if you're not getting enough sleep, and if you're not getting enough sleep, as well as if you are still kind of struggling from an emotional standpoint. So that comes back to getting really curious. So if you're eating when you're not hungry, getting curious about the reason why. Because that's a lot of time where we get tripped up is where we want to make healthy choices. We want to make all these healthy things, but oftentimes we will make an unhealthy choice simply because we are choosing to eat a certain food instead of feel a certain feeling. And it can help to kind of dig into what is that feeling I'm trying to avoid right now, and why, instead of just eating to kind of ignore it.
That's a great point. So let's dig deeper into emotional
Mhm.
eating.
Yeah.
Like you said, it is easier to go for a gallon of ice cream than
Yeah.
feel the certain feelings. And
Hmm.
like you can blame people for wanting to feel good instead of feeling bad. But how do we stop emotional eating? How do we not go that path, maybe all the way? Maybe how do we stop halfway there every
Hmm. Yeah, so this is something I coach women on a lot, is emotional eating and how to overcome it. And one of the biggest things I find is that people do not want to feel any emotion. They are very happy to just want to be happy all the time, all day long. They don't want to try to dig into any sadness or unhappiness. And anytime that they have a negative emotion come up, like, guilt or anger or frustration, instead of letting themselves feel it, they'll shove it down. I know I don't have time to feel this emotion. It's not convenient.
time?
I'm at work. I'll think about it later. And then it's almost like you're shoving it down, shoving it down, shoving it down. And then we eat food as an emotional release. So food is kind of like the way we get it out of our body in a way. It's not a productive way, but it's a way our body's releasing the food. And so the first step is kind of acknowledging that it's okay to have negative emotions because you're a human, and not resisting
Mhm.
it. I always talk about, we think about emotions and sadness and all these things as really painful, but it's only that way because we spend so much time resisting them. If I don't know if you think about it, if you were to cry and you finally cry, you cry really hard, you usually feel really good right after.
Yeah,
Like it's kind of like that building up to it. You're like, oh, I don't want to cry. And then you cry and it's like that release. And then you feel great. And you're like, oh, I feel a whole lot better now. And that's the thing. We stopped resisting it. We stopped resisting that emotion. We just allowed ourselves to feel it. And so the first thing I would say when it comes to, getting through some emotional eating is allowing yourself to experience emotions instead of using food. So just literally saying out loud, I give myself permission to feel. I am allowed to feel. And then to whatever the emotion is, I'm allowed to feel sad. I'm allowed to feel angry. I'm allowed to feel happy. And actually physically saying it out loud and giving yourself that permission and that allowance. And it removes that restriction and not judging yourself around it, because we are human, which means that we're not always going to be happy all the time. And it is an ad. In fact, because we are not happy all the time, it allows us to have that contrast, right? If it's always sunny, we never know that it's sunny out.
exactly.
Versus, exactly, it's that contrast of emotion. And so when you're in those moments when you're sad and upset, it just means that you're going to be so much happier later because you'll have that kind of that contrast effect. So not basically giving yourself full permission to feel different emotions, and understanding the reason why we often don't want to feel them and why we consider them so painful is simply because we've never let ourselves feel them without resistance. So, if I'm angry, like truly angry, research has shown it only takes about 90 seconds from the uptake of that thought without resistance for the neurochemistry to actually all go through your body and it to be clear of that, to be clear of it. It's about 90 seconds. So if you're really angry and you like punch a pillow a few times, you're like, that's about 90 seconds versus, we're at work and we're like, we don't have time to be angry, and you're still angry for the entire day because you're resisting it versus just allowing yourself to experience it. And so with that, it's also really important to um, dig into a little bit about what emotions feel like for you. So I work with my clients on almost creating an emotional vocabulary. So often, instead of saying, I'm hurt or I'm depressed or I'm, interested or I'm anxious or, I'm humiliated or bitter or whatever, descriptor word it is, we just say,
Mhm.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm just tired. And it's like, we'll say something like that instead of actually digging deeper into how we feel. And our brain basically fears what it doesn't understand, right? It doesn't like things that are unknown. It's scary. It doesn't want to go there. And so the more that we can kind of give ourselves information about how we're feeling, it's less scary and easier for us to experience it and not resist it. So another tip I would say was almost create a bit of an emotional dictionary for yourself. Like, what does sadness feel like to you? What does happiness feel like versus what does abandoned versus what does vulnerable versus lonely? Like lonely versus tired are a very different thing. Yet at night, oftentimes we end up emotionally eating because we're lonely, but we'll just say we're tired. And so being able to name the emotion and kind of going through and creating a larger emotional vocabulary for yourself so that you can express yourself. And it's a lot easier to express yourself and have less resistance when you kind of understand what is going on.
I think that's a beautiful practice just in general, independently of whether you struggle with food or you struggle with other substances or just struggle with your mental health. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful practice that will benefit so many points
Mm-hmm.
in your life. So,
Absolutely. It's emotional like resilience and intelligence. It's every single area of your life. It's not just food. And
yeah.
that's a cool thing about intuitive eating is the tools that I teach and practice. It doesn't stop at food. It doesn't stop at body. It has ripple effects across your entire life, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you talk more about, in your own experience working with your own clients, how does food and our relations to the food affect our self-image and our self-esteem and self-worth? Like, where does it start? Does it start with I eat too much, so I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm unlovable? Or does it start with I am unlovable, I am ugly, so I'm gonna go grab a donut? Where does it start, or is it a circular relationship?
Yeah, it's kind of, it usually turns into a, like you said, kind of a bit of a spiral effect. So it's okay, I don't like the way my body looks, so I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat less food. I'm going to restrict, basically. And then what happens when you restrict is that your brain thinks, oh, something's gone wrong. Why is she withholding food? Let's send her a bunch of urges to eat food. So then maybe you're super healthy in the morning. And then by the afternoon, you're like getting pretty hungry and your brain is like, we want food now. We want to get energy levels up. And so then you eat a whole bunch of food and you think, what is wrong with me? Why am I out of control? I'm broken, like I don't know why I'm like this. And then you do the same thing the next day. So, okay, I'm gonna eat really good, eat really clean, and then you restrict, and then same thing happens at night, you overeat, or maybe it'll be a few days apart, but it's kind of that cycle of, I don't like myself, I'm fed up with feeling this way and looking this way, I'm gonna do better. You do better for a really short period of time, and then your brain, because this is how your brain works, thinks, okay, she's she's struggling, get her energy levels up for survival, send her a bunch of urges to have cravings to overeat, and then you overeat, thinking it's self-sabotage when it's really self-protection from your brain standpoint. And then you kind of just repeat that cycle. And the more times that you have this idea of today is going to be a better day, and then you kind of disappoint yourself, you lose confidence with yourself, you lose that trust with yourself. And then kind of the times between those cycles of I'm going to do better sometimes get a little bit longer, and those feelings of I'm unworthy and I'm gross and I don't like who I am, those times become longer. And you kind of sit into that space of I'm kind of broken and I'm not good enough, and then our eating and our exercise habits really end up as a reflection of that. And so it's kind of becomes a bit of a downward spiral. And when they come to me, they feel like they're out of control. They feel like there's something wrong with them. They say that I want to do better, and I'm so ready to be healthy and make all these choices, but I don't know why I can't. And so it's breaking down the mindset behind it, because when we're thinking that we're self-sabotaging, it's really just our body just protecting us. And so kind of the first step is what I dig into with my clients is the education, understanding how your brain works around food, understanding how your body works, knowing that if I'm consciously restricting foods, then my body as a result is going to try to compensate by getting me to eat a whole bunch more foods later. And so, dieting restriction leads to generally more weight gain because your body's trying to protect you. And things like that, people don't necessarily, they think that there's something wrong with them. So the huge part of it is the education behind it, to understand like you're not broken. Because a lot of our eating and our bad eating or bad exercise habits are driven by shame and driven by guilt. You feel bad, we end up doing more things that make us feel bad. I don't like my body, I feel gross the way I am. We tend to want to comfort ourselves, and we comfort ourselves with food. So that just leads down that spiral. Versus, okay, I'm doing this behavior because of this, like the education. And you feel very empowered once you understand why. You feel less like, what is wrong with me? And more like, oh, I get it. I understand. So having that education piece, and I coach around what I call EAT. So E is education, A is accountability. So someone who's been through it before, who coaches it every single day with dozens and dozens of women. And then T, which is tools. So I give a lot of different tools for how to really make that switch and feel really empowered and abundant as you're, leaning towards a more balanced, effortless, easy lifestyle with your eating and how you move your body. So even like the crowding out technique, like little things like that to make you feel good and feel empowered in your choices. And like I was saying before, when you feel good, you're going to do more things that make you feel good. It's like that kind of a spiral effect on the other side. And so it's kind of looking at your life and wondering, okay, where am I at right now? And am I doing this to make myself feel good? Or am I doing this and doing this to make myself feel good from a space of love? Like I want to feel empowered, I want to feel awesome, or from a space of fear, which weight gain and all these things, you're afraid of gaining weight. Because if you're afraid of weight gain, you're afraid of, looking a certain way, you're afraid of just like living from a space of fear, you're going to want to comfort yourself, and that's going to turn into a downward spiral. Versus, I'm doing this because I feel like I love myself. And then you want to make positive choices from that space, and that just kind of compounds on itself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I would assume, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but for people who are already struggling with emotional eating or, intuitive eating in general, we just got off holiday season, and
Mhm.
there is a lot of, I guess, society puts a lot of different roles onto the food. We celebrate birthdays with food, we meet with people for brunches and stuff like that. And so I think in those kind of situations, it becomes harder to control what we eat and how much we eat. So do you have any tips on how to remain in control of your eating and how to continue to stay as intuitive as possible, even in those situations?
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest things I see people do, especially around the holidays or after the holidays, is they'll try to show up places really hungry so that they almost are allowed to eat food when they get there. So they'll go to like a holiday party, or they'll go to an event, and they won't have eaten all morning or all day just in preparation. So that when they get to the event, that they can kind of be like, oh, I haven't eaten anything, therefore, I'm allowed to eat all this food
I
kind of thing.
know people like that, yes.
Exactly. They're like, oh, I'm starving. And the same thing when we go to restaurants, right? Be like, oh, I'm going out for dinner in 4 hours, so I won't eat anything before. And then you get to the restaurant and you're not paying any attention to your friends or what's happening. You're watching the waiter. When is he coming with my food? Like you're staring, and he goes by
Yeah.
your table with like another plate, and you're like, ah. So I see it so often. We think we have to be starving to eat a meal. And that's where a lot of us get into trouble. So I talk about the hunger scale a lot in my coaching. And if 0 is like painfully hungry and 10 is like I'm bursting at the seams full, you really want to be starting to eat around that 3, 4 and stop eating around that 6, 7. So 3, 4 is like I'm just starting to get hungry, some noticeable hunger signs. Maybe my stomach is feeling a little bit like, oh, I could eat right now. And if you're starting to eat at that point, then you're able to stop when you're kind of like, yeah, I'm satiated. Like that's good. I'm a little bit full, but like that's perfect. But the thing is, especially around holiday parties, is we'll end up showing up places absolutely starving. We're like a 0, 1, 2 on a hunger scale. We're hangry, we're grumpy, we're irritable. Our stomach is grumbling. And then what happens is we're kind of let loose on this whole plate of, all this food, especially at parties. There's platters. Everyone's like, oh, try this treat. And it is all high sugary, high calorie foods. And again, because you haven't eaten, your brain is like, okay, this is exactly what we need to get our energy levels up. We want high sugary, high calorie foods because, again, from your brain standpoint, it's only concerned with survival. And if your energy levels are getting dangerously low, thinking about it, this primitive part of your brain, operating basically from thousands of years ago, it wants to get your energy levels up in case, the Vikings come over the hill to kill you. And so if you're showing up places absolutely starving, your brain is only concerned with getting your energy levels up. And so if it sees a plate of cookies or a plate of treats, it thinks that's high sugar, high calorie. I'm going to eat a bunch of those to get my calories, to get my energy level up right now. And so then we show up these parties, we're starving, we end up eating all of this food because our brain is sending you all these crazy signals to eat all the food. And then we eat way past that full and we feel really uncomfortable. But that was simply only because we had waited too long to start eating. And so a tip, whether around the holidays or anytime in general, don't wait until you're absolutely starving to eat, because it will guarantee that you're going to want higher calorie, high sugary foods, and then it's going to be very difficult to stop when you're actually full.
Yeah,
And
then you
so
go from 0 to 10 really easily.
exactly, I think of it almost like a pendulum swing. Like if you start eating when you're at 0, you're starving, going to pass out, you're probably going to want to stop finishing by the time you're 10, like bursting at the seams. Versus if you start eating at like a 3, if you kind of think about it almost like those marbles kind of, I don't know what you call them, but if you know those marbles, like the marble balls, they kind of hit each other and
Yes.
they swing side to side.
Yep.
And they go the same length to one side, the other side. Yeah, so it's kind of like that. Like the less you make it at extreme ends, the easier it is to keep within that kind of sweet spot of, okay, I'm eating when I'm starting to get a little hungry, which means I'm able to stop when I'm lightly satiated. So do not delay your hunger, because basically it's guaranteeing that you're going to overeat as a result.
Great advice. So let me ask you this: do all these trips where do all these tricks
Mhm.
where you kind of try to trick your brain into thinking it's full, do they work? I'm talking about eating slower, being more mindful, and things like have bigger plates and food kind of more spread out on a bigger plate. Do any of those tips and tricks work, or is this just a hoax?
Mhm. So definitely when it comes to slowing down when you're eating. So one of the things that we're very often doing, and I've been very guilty of this myself, is eating really quickly. And so it's not so much a hack or a trick, it's more just the food actually has time to hit your stomach, right? So food takes about 15-20 minutes to actually hit your stomach so that you feel full. And we usually end up eating all of our meals in about 5 minutes. We're at a lunch break, we just shove everything in our mouth, we're on the go, whatever. And so we keep eating, we eat past full basically because we don't even know where full is because we didn't let food hit our stomach. And so when we're eating more mindfully and more slowly, basically it just gives our body a chance to feel full because we haven't continued to eat and eat and eat until, past that 20-minute mark and we're like, oh my God, we ate too much. And so if you can, try to slow down your eating just so that the food has a chance to hit your stomach. And then you can decide if you want to get more food. And oftentimes, because we haven't given ourselves enough time for food to hit our stomach, we'll go out for seconds or order more food or we'll keep eating off our plate. And it's not actually that our body is still hungry. It's just that we haven't given that time for the food to hit our stomach. And so it's not really kind of like a trick. It's really just your body and how it works. It's just we haven't given ourselves enough time to listen to our own body. When it comes to a plate, when sitting down and having like food actually on a plate instead of eating out of a bag, it can definitely help again with the mindfulness and being a bit more intentional with your eating. And so in terms of like the size of the plate, again, our brain likes abundance. It likes to have lots of availability. And so for you, if you feel really abundant, if you feel really awesome, if you have a small plate and a whole bunch of food stacked high on it, and that works for you, then awesome. But sometimes for other people, it doesn't really do much. It's kind of, again, finding what is intuitively working for you. But I would suggest, when possible, to plate your food just because you're able to see the food you're eating, get a little bit more mindful and a little bit more intentional behind it instead of just eating out of a bag where you'll kind of start eating and reaching for it. And then you're not able to tell as much where that fullness is simply because you have no real measure of how much you've eaten.
Great advice. So would you say, is it really possible, is it really realistic to heal emotional eating on our own, or taken a step further, is it possible to heal eating disorders without any outside help from therapist or a coach or anyone like that? Is there enough of, I guess, will that people have that it is possible to do it on your own? Or is the community, especially a community of knowledgeable people who have gone through these experiences, or therapists, how important is that community in healing the relationship to food?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's crucial. And I thought I could recover on my own for a really long time. I had the information, I had a lot of the tools, but what I was missing was that kind of accountability and that ability to share with others. And the thing with eating disorders as well is it's not an illness of the body, right? It's an illness of the mind. It's a mental illness is what an eating disorder is, because it doesn't even matter what size your body is, it's how your mind perceives it. And
Mhm.
so we're not always in our right mind when we're suffering, right? We're not always thinking rationally because it's kind of our brain has been taken over by this eating disorder version of ourselves. And so even though I thought I was making good choices, in hindsight, they weren't. But in that moment, it's because my mind wasn't truly my own. It was kind of infiltrated by this kind of just eating disorder sickness. And that's what it is. It's an illness, right? It's like depression or anxiety or anything like that. Like it's you, but it's not you. And when you can bring in other people who understand that and can help you and support you through it, it makes a huge, huge difference. As well as, a lot of our eating disorders are really driven by shame and guilt and feeling like you're not enough. And that is very much in the secrecy and very much in being alone, right? It thrives in that keeping us in the dark by keeping us thinking we're not worthy. And we can bring in other people who fill us up and make us feel good and say, hey, we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. I got your back, like together, we're going to do this. All of a sudden, it's like this burden that's been on your shoulders for you. It's being spread out amongst a community, and it's no longer just yours to take on. And it's really through that, opening it up and sharing and saying, hey, I feel this way, or this happened today. And when you release that, you no longer need to use food as that same release. You no longer need to control your body for that same kind of feeling of control, because you have those around you who are supporting you and helping you and who have been there before. And so if you're listening to this and you're someone who's you're struggling with your eating and, with exercise addiction or whatever it is, you need to talk about it. You need to talk about it. As humans. That is how we get through things. We need to, what we call, co-regulate, basically regulating through with others. And that is how we really recover and get better, is having that accountability and having that support. And so absolutely is it essential. And I would never recommend to anyone trying to recover alone, because I don't think it's truly possible to do it on your own. And you might think maybe you're making some strides and some steps, but I can promise you that it's nothing compared to what is possible if you have some outside help.
That's a great advice. That's beautifully put. I think community is really important with any mental health struggle, but it just gives you that support, and it also gives you a community to celebrate with, because
Yes.
it's so much more fun to share your progress with other people.
Yeah, and that's what I share with my clients as well, is we need to focus on the wins. And, I was saying before, intuitive eating is so much about trust and building trust. And so a little tip for people listening is what I call is creating a trust and wins document. So on your phone, labeling, a notes app on your phone, trust and wins. And every time that you do something that you're proud of, whether it be food, body, work, exercise, write it down. Today I decided to have the apple when I had the chocolate bar instead of just having the chocolate bar. Or today I decided to go for a walk at lunch. Or today I got some sunlight when I was feeling really down. Write those moments down, because the way our brain works, it's primed to only think about the negative experiences, right? If you think about it from thousands of years ago, it's not important for you to remember that the yellow berries are delicious. It's important to remember that the red berries are going to kill you. So by design, our brain is very negative to remember the things that are going to keep us alive, the things that might kill us. Like, that's what we want to remember. And so we have to force our brain to look at the positive, force our brain to look at that things that make us feel good, because then that kind of builds on itself, the things that make us feel good. And so create a document on your phone and just document all those times that you had a little win and they had those moments that you felt good, because it's by focusing on that you build trust with yourself. And intuitive eating is all about trust. So don't give any energy or any attention to the moments that aren't going well or going badly, because then your brain is basically thinking that is what is important, that you want to create more of that, versus focusing your time and energy on the positive things. And then as a result, you will create more of those things. You're going to feel better. And when you feel better, you end up doing more things that make you feel good.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Victoria, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and so many valuable tips and insights, because food does play a very big and important role in our survival and in our pleasure. So thank you so much for all the tips and all of the great advice. And I'm sure listeners will find even more amazing tips, and they can get in touch with Victoria on her website, which will be shared in the episode notes. So thank you so much for taking the time today to share all of this insight with us.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to join you guys. Find me on my website, www.victoriaevansofficial.com. If you have Instagram, it's at Victoria Evans Official. I have a private Facebook group, Intuitive Eating Support Group for Badass Women. So all those things, or you can email me, hello@victoriaevansofficial.com. And I love to talk and chat and support anyone who may need it. So please find me.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you've learned a lot of new strategies. Be sure to check out the notes below this episode for additional resources and tools mentioned in today's show. I would love to keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts and takeaways with me on social media channels, wherever you are. And do not forget to tag me. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you, and I will see you on the next episode. If this podcast has helped you even a little bit, please leave a review and subscribe so that we can help spread the message together.